Growing up, my life had been simple, marked by familiar traditions and predictable routines. I was raised in a small suburban town where everyone seemed to know everyone else. My parents, devoted yet practical, instilled in me values centered on loyalty, hard work, and trust. They were pillars of the community. My father worked at a local bank, and my mother taught third grade at the nearby elementary school. From them, I learned the importance of building a solid foundation, both in life and relationships. When I first met Marie during a college lecture on Renaissance literature, I was instantly captivated by her energy. She laughed freely, gestured vividly while talking, and always managed to draw people into her world with ease. I admired her ability to bring warmth to any room, a quality that stood in stark contrast to my quieter, more introspective nature. Our connection grew through shared late-night conversations and library study sessions, where I often watched her as she recited poetry or discussed history with a passion that lit her eyes. After graduation, our paths converged naturally into marriage, a commitment I cherished as the beginning of a lifelong partnership. The early years were rich with adventure, spontaneous road trips, and the thrill of exploring life together. But, as is often the case, the initial fire cooled into a more measured companionship. I told myself that this shift was normal. It was what mature love evolved into, a blend of patience, comfort, and subtle devotion. The thought that anything could disrupt this familiar life never crossed my mind. One quiet evening, I found myself at the dining table, skimming through the medical records of my daughter, Katie. The paperwork was part of her kindergarten enrollment, and I was mindlessly reviewing the details while my wife, Marie, had placed the school forms nearby. As I leafed through the documents, my eyes fell on a note that would shatter the very core of my world. In the section that listed Katie's blood type, I read A. For an instant, my mind went blank. Gripped by shock, I struggled to comprehend what this simple detail implied. I walked over to the cabinet and unearthed 2 pieces of our medical history. They confirmed what I remembered with sharp clarity. My blood type was B, while Marie's was O. This combination made it biologically impossible for Katie to be my child. If Marie is her mother and I was there when Katie was born, I thought, then the father had to be someone with type A. The kids were already asleep. Marie was upstairs watching TV. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the backyard, thinking. How was my marriage? I muttered to myself. It was fine, I guess. Pretty average. There were good times and bad. It depended on the day. When we first started dating and during the early months of our marriage, Marie and I were madly in love. We made love constantly, sometimes with intensity. Even when we weren't in bed, we were affectionate, holding hands, touching as we passed each other. But over time, that faded. Doesn't that happen to every marriage? I asked myself. But now, with undeniable proof of her betrayal staring me in the face, everything I thought I knew about our relationship came apart. I thought, did things change slowly or suddenly? It felt like both. Our decline in closeness was gradual at first. But about 6 years ago, just a few months before Katie was conceived, there were some odd moments. Marie, usually open and loving, began acting strange. One evening, she came home very late, let me kiss her briefly, then went straight to the shower and avoided me for the rest of the night. The next morning, she was distant and curt, but that night, she was different. She came home early, made a special dinner, and later initiated passionate sex with enthusiasm that I thought we'd lost. We embraced afterward, and Marie said, "I love you so much." That week, we had passionate sex several more times. But soon after, there was another cold night. She came home late, didn't speak, and headed straight to the shower. Over the next 2 months, I barely recognized her. Marie was sometimes warm and loving, other times cold and detached. Sometimes attentive, other times distracted and irritable, sometimes patient, other times short-tempered. I asked her a few times, "Is something wrong, Marie? Are we okay? Problems at work?" The only reply I got was, "I don't know, Bill. I'm just a bit stressed. Sorry." After a few months, things normalized, but it wasn't like it was at the start of our marriage. Marie's mood swings were less intense, but she was no longer affectionate. Her interest in sex dwindled. We made love no more than once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, and only when I brought it up forcefully. Any gentle suggestion, like, "Want to fool around tonight?" was met with a sharp refusal. I had to remind her how long it had been for her to agree. And even then, she made it clear it was just to appease me. Is this how all marriages go? I wondered. I only knew mine, so I couldn't say. I often thought about what might be wrong, even considering she might be having an affair. But soon after, Marie got pregnant, and the excitement of expecting Katie pushed my worries aside. When Katie was born, exhaustion from taking care of her made Marie's disinterest in Zex more understandable, though it still bothered me. When Katie was 3, Marie became pregnant again, and Brian was born right after Katie turned 4. Bill and Marie, once lovers and spouses, became Bill and Marie, the parents of 2 beautiful, tiring kids. We both loved our children dearly, and even though I now realize I was deeply unhappy with our marriage and the near absence of closeness, I didn't see it then. And if I did, I just assumed all parents of young kids went through this. But now, with the shocking revelation that Katie wasn't my child, the events from 6 years ago suddenly made sense. Marie must have started an affair around that time, I reasoned. That explained the coldness, the showers, and the sudden affectionate spells, which could have been guilt, or an attempt to hold on to her marriage. Sitting in the yard as darkness fell and stars appeared, my shock turned into anger. Not only had Marie betrayed me, but she'd given me someone else's child to raise, maybe even more than one. Maybe Brian isn't mine either, I thought. If I had only been thinking of punishing Marie at that moment, I would have stormed into the house, shown her the blood-type evidence, forced her to admit everything, and kicked her out. But it wasn't that simple. I loved my kids, regardless of whether they were biologically mine. If we divorced, Marie would likely get full custody once it came out that they weren't mine. I sat and thought. What do I want? I asked myself. The answers were surprisingly straightforward. First, I wanted to know exactly what Marie had done. Was it just a brief fling? Does she not even know that Katie isn't my child? Or has she known all along and been secretly seeing someone for years? And second, I wanted to raise my kids as my own and ensure they never found out I wasn't their biological father. Once I understood my goals, planning the next steps felt surprisingly simple. I went back inside, grabbed some cotton swabs, and quietly entered each child's room. I took cheek swabs from both children without waking them, labeling Katie's with a 2 and Brian's with a 3. Then I swabbed my own cheek and marked it with a 1. I had a friend who worked in a university chemistry lab, so I arranged for him to run DNA tests for me. This was my first move, the start of gathering the information I needed. When I got the results, I knew what my next step would be. A week later, my friend called with the results. He didn't know whose samples they were. I explained. I met people with the same last name, and we're checking if we're related. Hey, Bill, he said. The samples marked 2 and 3 are definitely related. They're brother and sister, but the 1 sample isn't related to them. Looks like those folks aren't your relatives after all. I thanked him and hung up. So Katie and Brian were siblings sharing the same parents. Marie had 2 kids with another man. But did she know? I wondered. She obviously knew she was involved with someone else. But did she know he was the father of our children? There was an easy way to find out. I walked into the kitchen where Marie was washing dishes. Honey, I need to ask you something, I began, without making eye contact. She told me to go ahead, so I continued. A colleague of mine has a biologist friend doing some DNA research, and he needs related samples. I said I'd take swabs from us and the kids. I already did the kids' swabs before bed, so we just need ours, okay? I watched Marie closely as I spoke. Midway through, she tensed and nearly dropped the dish she was washing, but regained her composure and continued. After I finished speaking, Marie paused for a moment before turning to face me. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, Bill, she said. How do we know what they'll do with the samples or if the information will stay private? I opened my mouth to protest, but she interrupted me. No, I'm really not okay with this. Please tell your colleague we're not interested. Okay, honey, I replied calmly. It's no big deal. Her reaction only confirmed my suspicions. I realized my next step had to be uncovering everything I could about her potential affair or affairs. Who was involved, where it happened, when, and perhaps even why. It was possible that Marie had hidden something in the house that might provide a clue, but I would need time for a thorough search. That Saturday, we had plans to visit her parents for the afternoon. Just minutes before we were supposed to leave, I walked into the bedroom and called our home phone from my cell, pretending to speak to my boss. Ending the fake call, I turned to Marie. I'm so sorry, honey, I said, putting on an apologetic tone. There's a crisis at work, and they need me for at least 4 hours. If I don't go, the company could be in serious trouble. Damn it, Bill, Marie said, frustration evident in her voice. My parents are really looking forward to seeing the kids. I know, I said soothingly. I'm really sorry. You go ahead, apologize for me. You and the kids will have fun, and I'll see you tonight." She reluctantly agreed and soon drove off with the kids. I now had a few hours to search the house systematically. I decided it was pointless to check areas I frequently used, as Marie likely wouldn't hide anything there. I skipped the kitchen, living room shelves, and common areas. I didn't bother with my side of the bedroom or bathroom, but I meticulously checked her closet and dresser drawers. I was only surprised to find some very hot lingerie I'd never seen her wear, hidden in the far back corner under regular clothes. Clearly, she didn't want me to know about them. Only the kids' rooms and the attic were left. The children's room seemed unlikely, so I climbed up to the attic. There were various old pieces of furniture, a couple of lamps, and boxes of pre-wedding books and items. It was too much to go through one by one, so I inspected more closely. I noticed one of 3 boxes in the corner was less dusty than the others. Upon closer inspection, I saw they had been moved more recently than the rest of the untouched attic junk. I focused on these 3 boxes and found everything I was looking for. These were all Marie's old belongings, mainly letters from friends and acquaintances from her college years. I also found a collection of letters and keepsakes from me, including sweet greeting cards and similar items. Near the bottom of one box, hidden under old papers, was a thin pile of newer notes and 2 videotapes. I took them out. The tapes were unmarked. The notes were from Harry and were brief but clearly erotic. I brought the tapes and notes downstairs for a closer look. After 20 minutes of reading through the notes, I knew almost everything I needed. Marie had been having an affair with Harry, her boss at work. The affair appeared to have started about 3 months before Katie was conceived, during the time when Marie was acting erratically at home. All the notes were from Harry to Marie, and they were rough and intense. There was no affection, only lust. From the start, their relationship seemed like a dominant submissive dynamic, with Harry taking charge. Some notes instructed her on how to dress for certain occasions. Others detailed how their next late-night encounter would go. A few congratulated her on the birth of their children and mocked me as a clueless fool raising kids that weren't mine. Harry clearly had no intention of acknowledging his children. I knew he was married to a kind woman named Caroline, and they had 3 kids. Caroline, it seemed, was just as unaware of his infidelity as I had been. My jaw clenched as I read. Harry had clearly dominated Marie, but she had willingly gone along with it. There was no hint of coercion or blackmail. Marie seemed to enjoy playing her submissive role and following his commands. It was also obvious that they both knew who the father of Marie's children was, and took some pleasure in keeping that secret from me. The notes didn't reveal much more about Marie herself, but there was no doubt she had deceived me for over 6 years, having children with another man while pretending to be my devoted wife. I had been simmering with anger for days, but these notes pushed me to the edge. My plans for revenge would now include Harry as well. I paused, then decided to play the tapes. The first showed Marie and Harry having sex. Judging by Marie's hairstyle, it was in a room I didn't recognize, likely Harry's house. The second was filmed more recently in my own bedroom. I wondered when Marie had the chance and remembered my business trips over the past year when she might have left the kids with her parents. The recordings confirmed Harry's dominance over Marie and her eager compliance. The lighting was dim, but they were both visible, and the sound was remarkably clear. Every word and moan was audible. On the first tape, at the start of their affair, Harry was already giving commands. He sat on the bed and ordered Marie to do a seductive dance, which she did, smiling. The sex was rough, not tender, and his tone was harsh. I was saddened to see that Marie was enjoying it. The second tape featured similar scenes, but had new, revealing dialogue. They lay on the bed, and Marie asked why Harry didn't mind me raising his children. He replied, "Bill's a decent guy, and as you say, he loves kids. I have my own 3, and I'm not worried. If not for that, I'd just tell you to leave him." "What's he good for besides changing diapers?" Harry asked. Marie responded, "That's not fair, Harry. Bill is kind and a good man. He truly loved me and provided well for us." "And that's why you let me have my fun all these years, huh?" Harry said. Marie smiled and playfully hit his arm. "You've never been as gentle or kind as Bill, and that's probably why I'm drawn to you." "Yeah, baby. I give you what you want. Now let's get to it before I have to leave." After watching both tapes, I sat in disbelief at their audacity. Not only writing these notes, but leaving them and the tapes where I could find them. My revenge would be thorough and aimed at both of them. I scanned each note onto my hard drive and used advanced software from work to convert the tapes into digital files for editing later. Once finished, I put the notes and tapes in my car's trunk, hiding them under the spare tire. Finally, I tidied up the attic, placing everything back as it was so Marie wouldn't suspect a thing. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully planned and executed my strategy. Surprisingly, it was easier than I thought to act normal around Marie, pretending as if nothing had happened. I reminded myself that she had deceived me for 6 years, so why should I struggle to do the same? I was sweet and attentive, took care of the kids, showed affection to Marie as before, and even initiated closeness a few times. But I did it subtly so she could easily turn me down. The truth was, I no longer wanted to touch her. An important day for Marie was coming up. She had recently been elected president of the Key Society, a significant local charity, and would be inaugurated at a luncheon where she would present the plans for the upcoming year. Marie had been a board member for 3 years and was proud of being chosen as president. She was anxious about her speech and asked me to help with the PowerPoint presentation she intended to use. This was my perfect opportunity. For a week, we worked on it every evening. She showed me her slides, and I helped organize them into a polished presentation. She practiced it multiple times over the month leading up to her big day, and it always went well. Meanwhile, I made an entirely different PowerPoint presentation and had it ready to replace hers. The night before the event, I deleted her file and replaced it with mine, adding a lock so it couldn't be stopped once it began. The only thing left was to confirm that Harry and his wife were attending. I casually asked her, "Are Harry and Caroline coming?" "Yes," she replied. "They'll be there for the big night." I felt excited, though for different reasons than Marie. We arrived early, and she looked beautiful in her black evening dress. I helped her set up the laptop and ran a quick test to ensure it would play. We enjoyed dinner and listened to the opening remarks. Then, Marie was introduced warmly by the outgoing president, and she stepped up to the podium looking both nervous and proud. As applause died down, she began her speech and launched the PowerPoint file. At first, everything went as expected, with photos of the Society's major projects and charts displaying finances. Then, as planned, it shifted. A series of still images from the videos appeared, frames showing Marie and Harry in compromising positions. Some were dark, but the 10 or 12 frames made it clear who they were. Marie kept speaking for a moment, then noticed the murmuring in the audience. She turned to look at the screen and gasped, knocking over a glass of water in shock. She stood frozen, her face turning crimson. Frantically, she pressed buttons, trying to stop the slideshow. The stills transitioned to video clips. "How are you going to stop Bill from finding out I got you pregnant?" Harry's voice echoed. "As long as I let him have sex sometimes. He won't suspect." "Not too much, baby. You're mine," Harry added. The room erupted into noise, laughter, gasps, and chatter. Marie was paralyzed by shock, too stunned to react. Caroline, Harry's wife, sat at the next table, grabbed a vase of flowers, smashed it over Harry's head, and stormed out. Amidst the laughter and chaos, people gradually left the ballroom, casting glances at Marie and whispering to each other. Before long, Marie and I were alone. She stood at the podium, defeated. I sat 10 feet away, grinning as I looked at her. Finally, she met my eyes with an expression of deep sadness. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." The irony was too much. I burst out laughing and walked out, still chuckling. But no, that's not how it happened. It was a satisfying fantasy, but unrealistic. If the whole town knew Harry was the father of my children, I'd lose them in the divorce. They'd hate being known as Marie's illegitimate children. I needed to be more discreet. I met with a divorce attorney several times to prepare the necessary documents. I created the exact PowerPoint presentation I envisioned, but didn't wait for Marie's big event. Instead, I planned to show it to her 4 weeks before. One evening, when the kids were asleep, I called her into the office. "Honey, I want you to see the draft of the PowerPoint I made for your speech." "Can it wait, Bill?" she asked, exhausted. "I'm really tired today." "No, honey," I said firmly. "I need to know what changes you want, so I have time to make them. Remember, I'm doing this for you in my free time." Reluctantly, she came into the office. I seated her in front of the computer. "Press A when you're ready. The file will run automatically," I said, smiling to myself. I watched her closely. At first, everything seemed normal as she rehearsed her lines with the initial slides about the Society's work. Then she gasped, her face going pale when the still images of her and Harry appeared on the screen. She turned to me, her mouth open but unable to speak. I stared at her, expressionless. Then the video clips played, revealing their conversation about Harry being the father of her children and keeping me unaware, followed by more explicit footage. Marie frantically tried to stop the slideshow, but I had locked it. The screen finally went black. The whole scene lasted about 2 minutes. Marie sat slumped in the chair, head down, unable to meet my eyes. I silently relished her torment. Eventually, she spoke, lifting her head to look at me. In that brief time, she looked as though she had aged 20 years. Bill, Bill, I'm so sorry. Tears welled up and spilled down her face. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? Forgive you, I responded coldly. For what? Let's go through it. Having an affair with Harry Dorner for 6 years, giving birth to his children and making me believe they were mine, mocking me behind my back, denying me closeness at his request. Is that what you want me to forgive? Her sobs intensified. Bill, I don't love him. You're the one I love, the only one I've ever loved. I felt a calm, cold rage. I didn't respond aloud, but thought, no, Marie, that's a lie. You love the life I provide, the security, but you don't love me. No woman who loves her husband acts this way. I sat back, watching her cry, enjoying the sight and saying nothing as she wept for 20 minutes. Finally, she wiped her face and looked at me. What are you going to do, Bill? Are you going to divorce me? No, Marie, I won't. I lied. I care too much about Katie and Brian, even if they aren't biologically mine. But things are going to be different from now on. First, call Harry and tell him to come here within 15 minutes. She looked terrified. But I can't. He's at home with his wife and kids. He won't come. I smirked. Tell him whatever you need to, but make sure he comes. Let him know that if he doesn't, his marriage will end tomorrow. Marie's eyes reflected fear as she looked at me. Without speaking, she turned and went to the kitchen to call Harry. When he arrived, he wore a tense, forced smile, which told me that Marie had already informed him about what happened. Come into the office, Harry, and have a seat. You too, Marie. We need to talk, I said. They both sat down and I began. Harry, you've been having your fun with Marie for some time now, making me look like a fool. That ends today. Things have changed, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. Harry opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. Sit down, listen, and watch. I played the PowerPoint presentation, and I saw the color drain from Harry's face as he processed the content. The silence that followed was heavy, and I savored it more than they did. Here's how this is going to work, Harry, I continued. You will follow my instructions exactly, or your marriage to Caroline will come to a very public, abrupt end. Nod if you understand. Harry hesitated, a flicker of anger in his eyes, but then he nodded. Good. Now keep your mouth shut. I have several documents for you to sign. You can have your lawyer review them, but you have 48 hours to return them signed. If not, Caroline will get an invitation to a private screening. I handed him the first document. This states that you acknowledge you're the biological father of Katie and Brian and agree to pay child support until they turn 21, along with a lump sum for college expenses. The figures are $10,000 per child annually, plus $100,000 per child at the start of their college years. The money will go into a trust fund I control and will be used as needed for their benefit. Harry jumped up, his face contorted with fury. This is insane, Bill. I'm not... Sit down, Harry, I ordered, pushing him back into his chair. Shut up. You have the money, and we both know it. This is my show now, not yours. Stay quiet. Marie watched me, her expression a mixture of fear and disbelief. She had never seen me like this before. I moved on. The second document is your consent for me to adopt Katie and Brian. Both you and Marie will need to sign it. The third document states that you relinquish all parental rights and agree never to disclose your biological connection to anyone. The final document is a personal admission that you maltreated my wife at work and coerced her into an affair. What? Harry shouted, leaping up again. That's a lie. She was just as willing as I was. Sit down, Harry, I said darkly. Maybe that's true, but Marie will still sign a complaint stating otherwise. This is my condition for not divorcing her. Understood, Marie? I asked, looking at her. She glanced between me and Harry, terrified, and said nothing. Let me make it clear, I continued. I don't plan to use any of these documents unless you fail to meet your obligations to the kids, your kids, or if you ever think of revealing their true paternity. I handed Marie the sexual maltreatment complaint prepared by my lawyer. Sign it, Marie. She looked frightened, but took the pen and signed at the bottom without a word. Now, Harry, we're nearly done for today. I want these signed documents back in my hands within 48 hours. You can deliver them to the house. And just so you know, if you ever entertain any dark thoughts about injuring me, there are multiple copies of your incriminating letters and notes secured. People are instructed to ensure they come to light if anything happens to me. Any questions?" I finished, glaring at him with disdain. I took Marie's hand and guided her back into the office, seating her gently. She was visibly shaken, trembling with fear. "Marie, it's all right. I would never hurt you physically. You don't need to be afraid," I reassured her. "God, Bill, what's happened to you? How could you do this to Harry?" she asked, her voice filled with shock. I looked at her, surprised by her question. "Do you really not understand, Marie? Don't you see what he did to you and to me? It was cruel and unforgivable." A deep blush spread across her cheeks. "Yes, I see that," she said quietly. "But you're so angry, it feels like you've lost control." I fell silent for a moment, letting the tension settle before speaking again. "Marie, I promised I wouldn't divorce you. But things will never be the same. From this moment on, everything changes. Do you understand?" "Yes, Bill," she replied, her eyes pleading. "I'll do whatever it takes to make up for what I've done." "Good," I said firmly. "We're going to start with a few conditions. First, you will find a new job within 2 weeks. I will not tolerate you seeing Harry at work any longer, and this should go without saying, but you will have no personal contact with him. No touching, no calls, no emails, nothing. If our marriage is to move forward, it will be on new terms. I won't accept your coldness, mood swings, or indifference. You need to show, through your actions, that you love me and appreciate our marriage. The passion you showed Harry, I want to see that here with me, and I expect to see you in that lingerie I found hidden in the back of your drawer." I held her gaze meaningfully until she dropped her eyes in shame. "And when I want us to be intimate, I expect you to be ready, willing, and enthusiastic. If you truly love me, Marie, you have a lot of lost time to make up for." Tears welled up in her eyes as she crossed the room and knelt at my feet, wrapping her arms around my legs and looking up at me earnestly. "I love you, Bill, more than I can say. I'll show you, I promise." I looked at her tear-streaked, pale face and frightened eyes. Deep inside, there were traces of the love and devotion I once felt for her, but they were overshadowed by the anger at her betrayal. She deserved every consequence coming her way. I feigned a slight softening. "Listen, Marie," I said more gently. "In 4 weeks, your big dinner is happening. Let's use this time to rebuild, to create something better from what we have left. If all goes well, that dinner will be our chance to celebrate a new chapter. What do you say?" She nodded and hugged my legs tighter. "Yes, Bill, thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance. I will be the wife you want me to be." I pulled her close and she kissed my face and lips repeatedly, still crying. "Give me 10 minutes to freshen up, and then I'll start making things right," she said, standing up and giving a small, hopeful smile. She left, and I leaned back in my chair, smirking as I thought about the next 4 weeks and how she'd be bending over backward to please me. I was slightly amused that she hadn't noticed what I hadn't done. I hadn't asked her about the details of the affair, or how it began. The evening must have been such a shock that she didn't realize it. But I didn't ask because I simply didn't care anymore. I was done with Marie, even if she didn't know it yet. When I entered the bedroom a few minutes later, the bed was neatly made, the lights dimmed, and Marie lay on her side in a revealing red nightgown. Her face was washed, hair brushed, and makeup retouched. She looked as stunning as ever, but there was an anxious expression in her eyes. I noticed a bottle of lube on the nightstand. "Where are you?" she called in a seductive voice that trembled slightly. "Come here." She reached out her arms, and I undressed quickly and embraced her. We started kissing, and her body moved with eager intensity. Whether it was just for show, I didn't care. I found myself able to put my anger aside and indulge in the moment. Her body was beautiful, and her energy was exciting, especially after years of detachment. I lay back and let her take control, which she seemed eager to do. When we were done, she turned off the light and snuggled up to me under the blanket, softly kissing my neck. "Sleep well?" she whispered. As I drifted off to sleep, I looked forward to more of Marie's attention over the next 4 weeks. I thoroughly enjoyed that period as she put all her effort into repairing our marriage. The next morning, she woke me with a bright smile and a loving kiss, asking if I wanted some intimate attention before breakfast. I enjoyed my meal, watching as Marie went above and beyond to get the kids ready for their day. That evening, I came home to a special dinner Marie had found in a cookbook and decided to try. Katie and Brian, who preferred hot dogs and mac and cheese, weren't fans, but I enjoyed it. Marie made sure the kids were bathed and in bed on time so we could have our evening together. The time in the bedroom was even better than the night before. Marie wore another seductive nightgown, and our time together was relaxed and intimate. Her passion, affection, and energy reminded me of our early years. Despite my hidden feelings, it felt like we were a pair of newlyweds. Day after day, Marie's attention didn't falter. She was cheerful in the mornings and wild in the bedroom at night. New lingerie and different positions were now part of our life, and everything seemed like a dream. Except beneath my agreeable facade, I was seething. I no longer trusted her and only pretended to share in her affection. Harry's signed papers arrived in my mailbox within 48 hours, just as I'd requested. I had Marie sign the adoption consent quickly and took it to my lawyer. Within a week, he arranged a private court hearing, and 10 days later, the adoption was official. My lawyer then prepared the divorce documents. One morning at work, I was surprised when Denise Reynolds, a coworker I occasionally collaborated with, stopped by. At 28, she was 5 years younger than me and undeniably attractive. I knew she was divorced and had noticed some of her flirty remarks over time, though I'd never given them much thought beyond admiring her from a distance. I expected her visit to be work-related, but it wasn't. "Bill," she said, "something's different about you lately. Have you been working out? You seem younger or just more vibrant." "Thanks for noticing, Denise," I replied with a smile. Feeling bold, I added, "Actually, it's something else, but I can't get into it here. How about we have lunch together today?" "Sounds good," she said. We picked up lunch from a salad bar and ate at a park table, enjoying the sunshine. "The change you see is probably because my marriage is falling apart," I admitted. She looked surprised. "And that makes you look better? You'll have to explain." I gave her a slightly edited version of the situation. "A couple of weeks ago, I found out my wife had been cheating on me with a coworker for years. I put boundaries in place, and since then, she's been doing everything she can to make up for it. Here's a secret. Marie thinks she can win me back, but I've already decided I'm leaving her soon. I can't stay with someone who betrayed me. In the meantime, she treats me like royalty, and that's probably what you're noticing." Denise looked at me thoughtfully. "I'm impressed by how well you're handling all this. When I found out my ex was cheating, I was a mess for months before I felt like myself again." "I'm sorry you went through that," I said sincerely. "I had no idea. But right now I'm determined to stay in control of my life, and things are going to unfold on my terms." Taking a chance, I added, "One positive thing is that while I'm technically still married, I know I won't be for long, so I don't feel like I have to hold back from appreciating the beautiful woman in front of me." Denise blushed and glanced away before meeting my eyes again. "Bill, you caught me off guard. I didn't expect that." "Apologies, Denise, but you're stunning, funny, and I've been drawn to you since the day we met. It just wasn't something I could say until now. Would you like to have dinner with me on Saturday? I know a great Italian place by the river." She regarded me seriously. "Bill, I like you too, but can I trust you? Is your marriage really over, or is this just a line? I'm sorry, but I've seen situations like this before." "Denise, I've always been upfront with you. You know I never crossed any boundaries before. I'm ending things with Marie soon and filing for divorce right after. There's no turning back. But if you need time to think it over, I understand, even though I'll be disappointed." A smile spread across her face. "No, Bill. Now that you've put it out there, I'm willing to take a chance." She leaned forward, and we shared a light, tender kiss. It wasn't intense, but it felt like a promise. I left with a smile on my face. Later, when I told Marie I had a date for Saturday, it brought out a sharp edge in me. I made sure she knew I would be out with another woman while she stayed home with the kids. Marie stared at me in disbelief. "But Bill, I've been trying so hard to fix our marriage. How can you go out with someone else?" "It's simple, Marie. You spent 6 years seeing someone behind my back. Lately, you've been making an effort, but that doesn't mean you've earned my trust or loyalty. I need to enjoy myself before we can even begin to even things out." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Are you going to sleep with her?" "No, but I could. That's what you need to accept. If this hurts you, maybe now you'll understand how I felt." With that, I turned and walked out of the room. My first dates with Denise were wonderful, but cautious. We took our time, feeling that what we had was more than just physical attraction. We laughed, shared stories, and got to know each other better. It felt natural, like the early days with Marie, a thought that briefly saddened me, but I pushed it aside. After our third dinner, Denise softly asked outside her apartment, "Would you like to come in?" We both knew what that meant, and I immediately felt drawn to her. Inside, we embraced and kissed with youthful intensity. She pulled back slightly. "I want this, Bill, but I'm nervous. It's been a long time. Please, be gentle." "Of course," I replied, lifting her carefully. "Which way is your bedroom?" Our first time was gentle, relaxed, and tender. It felt more caring than the eager encounters I'd recently had with Marie. Denise was slightly shy and let me take the lead, enjoying every touch and kiss. When we were done, she kissed me and asked if I'd stay the night. I agreed, and we fell asleep holding each other. The next morning, she was a bit shy, and we didn't make love again, but we exchanged warm goodbyes and soft kisses. There were only a few days left before my final move with Marie. I didn't tell Denise my full plan, but assured her I'd be divorced very soon. On Saturday morning, I returned home to find Marie sitting at the kitchen table, quietly crying. Marie's expression told me she knew exactly where I had been. I approached her, feigning more sympathy than I truly felt, and wrapped her in a gentle hug. "I'm sorry, Marie. I know how this must feel," I said softly. She pulled back slightly, her eyes filled with tears. "Bill, it's unbearable. Knowing you were with someone else tears me apart. I've been so selfish all these years. How could I not think about how my affair would hurt you?" Her voice quivered as she whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance." Marie's big night, and mine, was approaching. Part of me almost regretted what was coming. The last 4 weeks had been filled with passion and sincere effort from Marie. She'd put her heart into showing how much she valued our relationship, and the sex had been amazing. But no matter what she did, my resentment and anger didn't fade. Her betrayal was too deep to forgive. When I searched my feelings, I found only a sliver of love left for her, and even less sympathy for what was about to happen. While helping her perfect her PowerPoint presentation for the event, I also prepared my own version. It removed Harry's identity and the detail of him being the father of the children, but kept the essential content, photos followed by video clips. I set up the laptop so her presentation would play by default, but a simple keystroke combination could switch it to mine. In the days before the dinner, Marie asked cautiously, "Bill, you did delete that awful file, right?" Smiling, I would show her the laptop and say, "Yes, honey, it's gone. Here's your presentation, ready to go with one click." Relief would wash over her, and she would refocus on her speech with renewed confidence. The last few days at home were particularly pleasant. Marie seemed convinced she had won me back and was more relaxed, humming as she moved around the house. Still, the pain she must have felt after my night with Denise seemed to fuel her efforts in the bedroom. Every moment with her felt bittersweet, knowing what was about to happen. The night of the event arrived. Marie looked stunning in a black evening dress with thin straps that showed off her shoulders and neck. I wore a rented tuxedo. We arrived early, rehearsed her presentation twice, and everything seemed in order. I even helped her set her purse under the podium. When she bent down, I keyed in the combination that would activate my version of the presentation if needed. Dinner was pleasant, filled with conversation and a few dry speeches. Finally, the outgoing president introduced Marie, who stood up and walked to the podium, smiling nervously as the room applauded. According to my watch, her confidence lasted exactly 54 seconds until the first still images of her and Harry appeared. She didn't freeze or knock over a water glass as I imagined. Instead, she turned to me with horror and disbelief before trying to stop the presentation. But of course, she couldn't. The video clips began, and their voices filled the room. Marie stood motionless, her face red, as the room erupted in gasps, murmurs, and shouts. Some people laughed, while others called out angrily. Soon the ballroom emptied, leaving her alone on the stage. I sat and watched. Finally, she turned to me, her voice shaking as she said words I had only dreamed of hearing. "Bill, how could you do this to me? I thought you loved me." "Yes, Marie," I said, standing up. "Over the past few weeks, I loved you just as much as you loved me for the last 6 years." I walked to the podium, placed the divorce papers in her hand, and added, "I'm divorcing you. You've been served. If you stay in town, we'll share custody of Katie and Brian. If not, I'll fight for full custody, and you know I'll win." As I reached the door, I heard her scream, "But you said you wouldn't divorce me. You said we could work it out." I turned back one last time and met her eyes. "Yes, Marie, but after all these years of you lying to me, I lied to myself." With that, I walked out, leaving her to face the consequences of her betrayal. The weeks following that fateful night were a blur of whispers, knowing glances, and cold indifference. My reputation at work remained intact, bolstered by my quiet professionalism, but the same couldn't be said for Marie. I'd heard from mutual friends and through the local grapevine that she'd resigned from her role at the Key Society. The weight of shame had pushed her into a reclusive corner where even the most persistent well-wishers couldn't reach. At home, the silence between us was almost comfortable in its predictability. The kids, innocent as ever, remained unaware of the storm that had engulfed our lives. Katie's drawings were still pinned to the fridge, colorful and chaotic, while Brian's laughter still echoed through the halls. Each sound reminded me that my choices, painful as they were, had preserved their childhood for now. I was their father in all the ways that mattered, and that was enough. One evening, a few weeks after the gala, I was sitting on the couch, staring at the flickering images on the television without really seeing them. Marie walked in, her eyes red-rimmed and her steps tentative. She clutched a small, battered notebook in her hands, a remnant of our earlier days. Without a word, she sat beside me, the space between us charged with years of unspoken grief. "I've been reading through this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I glanced at the notebook and recognized it immediately. It was filled with notes, plans, and dreams we'd made when life was simpler, our love untested. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added, her fingers tracing the edges of the worn cover. "But I need you to know that even at my worst, part of me always wanted to come back to this, to us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret and the echoes of a life that could have been. I took a deep breath, leaning forward to rest my elbows on my knees. "You know, Marie, it's not just about forgiveness. It's about trust. I don't think I can ever give that back to you. Not the way I once did." My words were calm, detached, as if they belonged to someone else. The raw edges of my anger had dulled, replaced by a cool, hollow acceptance. "I know," she said, tears sliding silently down her cheeks, "but I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove that I deserve whatever piece of you is left." She reached out, fingers brushing my arm, tentative and trembling. For a moment, I let the touch linger. It was familiar yet foreign, filled with the memories of better times and the reality of our now shattered life. "Marie, for Katie and Brian, I'll always be here. But for us," I paused, searching for the right words. "We're standing in the ruins of what we built, and I don't think either of us knows how to rebuild." She nodded, understanding etched in her expression. We sat in silence as the night deepened, shadows stretching across the room like silent witnesses to our broken vows. In the months that followed, our interactions became almost transactional. We co-parented with a strained politeness, conversations about school projects and birthday parties serving as placeholders for the closeness we once shared. I found a new rhythm, one where Denise's laughter became a part of my days and nights. She brought a warmth that was uncomplicated, a comfort that didn't come with the weight of betrayal. But as much as I tried to move forward, the past clung to me. I'd sometimes catch Marie watching the kids, her eyes softening in those moments when they were too caught up in their games to notice her. There was a sadness there, a realization that she'd gambled and lost more than just a marriage. She'd lost a part of herself that she'd never reclaim. One evening, while the kids were at a sleepover, Marie and I sat across the dining table, the silence no longer harsh but resigned. "Bill," she said, breaking the stillness, "I'm thinking of moving, somewhere nearby so I can still be a part of their lives, but far enough that we're not constantly reminded." I nodded, the idea of space a welcome one. "That might be for the best," I replied. The truth was, I needed room too. Room to breathe, to heal, and to finally let go of what we'd both held onto for far too long. Our divorce was finalized a month later, quiet and free of spectacle. Marie left with dignity, carrying only the essentials and the echoes of our life together. The house felt emptier but also lighter, as if the ghosts of our mistakes had finally found their release. Denise moved in gradually, her presence seeping into the cracks of the house and filling it with new stories, new laughter. She brought with her a hope I hadn't realized I was missing. Yet, amid the fresh starts and new memories, there was a part of me that still glanced back, not out of longing, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. Years later, as I watched Katie and Brian race across the lawn, their laughter blending with Denise's, I felt a rare peace settle within me. The journey had been brutal, marked by betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. But standing there, with the sun casting long, golden rays across the yard, I finally felt the echoes of acceptance. The past was behind me, not forgotten, but understood. And as I pulled Denise close, her smile mirroring the lightness I felt, I realized that the life we'd started to build was not just a continuation. It was a rebirth, one I was grateful for every single day.
I'm being blamed for one of the most significant thefts in my community, and you might find it hard to believe when I tell you who's behind it. It's my own brother. Now, my entire family is convinced that I'm the one who swiped the money. Some might say, I've brought this upon myself. Where did I think my actions were leading me when I ignored the advice of others? I was the one who chose a path that wasn't going to get me anywhere. The only justification I could offer my parents was that at least I was attending college. I knew I couldn't match up to my flawless brother, who was a doctor at their clinic. But here's the kicker. I flunked multiple times and had to retake several classes. I squandered the money my parents sent me on frivolous things because I fell in with the wrong crowd. At the 11th hour, I decided to clean up my act, focus on earning extra credit, and graduate on schedule. But there was a hitch in that plan. I didn't stick to it. After graduation, I fell back into partying, failed to secure a job, and couldn't pay off my college debt. Before I knew it, I was being evicted from my apartment a year after finishing college. At least I'd accomplished something I never thought would happen, even though I was saddled with student debt. But I had a strategy. Simply tell my parents that I needed money to pursue my honors, then use it to pay off the student debt. They outright denied giving me the funds, arguing that my course was pointless. So I turned to my brother for some financial aid. Danny has been working alongside my parents for a number of years. He's a decade older than me, and I used to think he was 10 times the person I was. My parents adored Danny. Everyone did. He was smart, kind, the complete opposite of me. I explained to him the predicament I was in, how I needed money to clear my college debt, as the debt collectors were on my tail. I was struggling to find and hold down a job. I knew I was in a bad place. Perhaps it was karma for screwing up my own life that had led me to hit rock bottom. But back to Danny. Danny was a highly skilled surgeon, owned a large house, had a wife, and a baby on the way. I wished I had heeded my parents' advice and pursued a career in medicine. Now, I was approaching my late 20s, and I had nothing to show for it. I shared my situation with Danny, and his only suggestion was that I should return home and confess everything to our parents. Absolutely not. They would be livid. I wasn't prepared for them to disown me. I knew they were already fed up with me not making anything of my life. I told him that was out of the question. Then he suggested that I should just come home, visit them, and then he would try to assist me. I inquired about the strings attached, and he responded that I would simply have to work for him. It seemed like a great arrangement. So, I stuffed all my belongings into a duffel bag and headed back home, spinning a web of lies. Danny was aware of the truth, but I concocted elaborate stories about my whereabouts and activities. In fact, he even assisted me, claiming it would make my story more credible when I started working for him. After a month, Danny informed me that he had the money ready for me. I didn't probe about the source of the funds or anything of that sort. The last thing on my mind was that my brother would exploit my desperate situation to frame me for theft. The amount he stole, pinning it on me, was 4 times the sum I needed to clear my debt. I assumed it was his own money that he had deposited into my account, and I was about to use it to pay off my debt. But, to my dismay, the payment was rejected. Upon investigation, I discovered that my account had been drained earlier. I contacted the bank to figure out what had happened, and it turned out that a significantly larger amount than what I had asked him for had been in my account. To make matters worse, it had been swiftly transferred to another untraceable account. How could this even happen? Well, in my naivety, I had handed over all my account details, copies of my documents, and so on. He managed to execute all this without leaving a trace, while I was still grappling with the bank's revelations. Suddenly, my mother stormed into my room unannounced and slapped me. The slap was so forceful that I saw stars. She then accused me of being a deceitful liar. That morning, my brother had revealed to them everything he had supposedly discovered about me. But here's the kicker. I was the one who had confided all that to him. He had set me up flawlessly, making it seem like I had pilfered the family's money. He had been meticulous in his setup, strategically leaving my college warning letters scattered around the house. I knew instantly it was him when my mother labeled me a thief and a fraudster. There was some truth to it, but I hadn't stolen their money. Had I known the source of that money, I would have urged my brother not to go ahead with it. What baffled me was his motive. He was thriving in his life. He didn't need all that money. He had a secure job, was highly esteemed in the community, and seemingly had an ideal marriage. I never harbored any resentment towards my brother or had any childhood squabbles with him. He was always the older, stronger one. He blazed the trail and I merely followed. I knew I could never match up to him, so I didn't even try. When my parents labeled me as the dim, feeble, and sluggish one, I accepted it. I caused mischief in school just to get their attention, but it was all in vain because, in their eyes and the eyes of our extended family, my brother could do no wrong. We come from a large family, and I've never felt valued by them. For years I sensed they were waiting for me to slip up. This was the perfect chance for them to finally weed out the black sheep of the family. But for once, I was innocent. I had already begun contemplating turning my life around. Being surrounded by my high-achieving family had inspired me to put my degree to use, curb my drinking, and establish a stable home. But now, they had all turned their backs on me. My mother hurled harsh words at me, words that still sting to this day. She expressed regret over giving birth to me. She wished she had died during childbirth, so she wouldn't have to witness the disappointment I had become. Then she hauled me into my father's office and spilled the beans about my supposed crime. My father gave me a 2-second glance and said, "I knew it was only a matter of time. You're no son of mine." Then he ordered me out of his sight. They left me in the office while they made phone calls, and all I could think was, I'm heading for jail. My brother arrived an hour later, and I pleaded with him to tell the truth, that I hadn't stolen the money. He claimed ignorance. He was a smooth operator, a master of deception. He acted as if he'd swallowed every lie I'd told them when I returned home, and my alleged crime was a shock to him. Then he offered to help Dad file a theft case against me. I fell to my knees, suddenly grasping the gravity of the situation. The prospect of being locked up was unimaginable. I knew I wouldn't survive. I was too weak. I would perish in there. I implored my mom not to let them send me to prison. My mom demanded to know where the money was, and I told them it was Danny who was the real culprit. He was the one who had drained the account, so I urged them to call the bank to confirm it. But when I made the call, they confirmed that the transaction was made by me, not Danny. He'd been cunning enough to erase his tracks, and everyone was buying his story. So, I reached out to the family members I was on good terms with, laid out the situation, and asked them to intervene with my dad. They expressed their belief that I'd turned over a new leaf, but stealing from my own family was a line they never thought I'd cross. They suggested that if I returned the money, they'd stand by me. I had no idea where the money was, but everyone seemed to have a theory. A family meeting was called, and I was discussed as if I wasn't even in the room. The consensus was that I'd fallen in with a bad crowd who'd influenced me to steal. Most family members were in favor of turning me in. They argued that I'd tarnished the family name. But then there was my grandmother. She didn't stand up for me. In fact, she looked at me with pure disdain. But she did say in no uncertain terms that while I had indeed betrayed the family, sending me to jail would only damage the family's reputation further. And that's how I ended up being banished from my parents' home. They bought me a one-way ticket out of the state and warned me that if I ever claimed to be part of their family, they'd have me thrown in jail. I was cast out, never to return or communicate with them again. I was left with zilch. I hit rock bottom with no cash, no buddies, and no employment. And my brother, the one I counted on to pull me out of the mess I was in, was the very person who used me as a fall guy to score some dough. I was furious at him and embarrassed about the mess I'd made of my life, and I couldn't see a way out. That was a year ago. I needed that harsh reality check to pull myself together. I'm proud to say that I've been clean for 8 months and have been gainfully employed for the past year. I work at a hardware store, the pay's all right, and I'm gradually paying off my debt. My life is pretty mundane. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, rinse, and repeat. But I take pride in the fact that I'm healthier now and have plenty of time to reflect on my past actions. I've realized that while I was indeed a wild child, what my brother did to me and how my family has always treated me was just not right. I'm supposed to let all this go, right? Move on with my life because they're far away. But something happened today at the hardware store where I work, a place frequented by people from all walks of life. I overheard a conversation that I wasn't supposed to. It was between two guys. I couldn't quite gauge their ages, but they were discussing a specific medication that's only available at a clinic run by someone named Danny. It could have been any Danny, but curiosity got the better of me, and I Googled the medication. Turns out, it's not FDA approved. If it's my brother, well, I feel sorry for him. I haven't sought out my brother in a long while, but I've been curious about what he's been doing with the money he swindled from the family and got away with. The answer? He owns his own clinic, which seems to be thriving. So, he's managed to escape scot-free, and I'm livid, absolutely livid that he threw me under the bus for money, and I guess I just needed someone else to be aware of this. What's my takeaway from all this? If you screw up your life, it's much easier for others to pin the blame on you. The next update didn't come for a whole 2 years. Yes, you heard it right, 2 long years. Let's dive right into it. It's incredible how destiny works. That time when I was semi-absorbed in the conversation between those two guys. These guys were indeed discussing my brother, who's currently in a heap of trouble. My sister-in-law reached out to me a couple of nights ago, requesting a meeting. I'm not sure how she tracked me down, but she was in a state of disarray, looking like she hadn't slept in days. My mind instantly raced to my brother, fearing something terrible had happened to him. She assured me that wasn't the case, but something bad was definitely brewing. She wanted to chat with me because she believed I was the only one who could help him. Given that I now knew where he sourced the funds to open his own clinic, there was no concrete evidence to support her claims. She explained that when he launched his clinic, he didn't exactly follow the straight and narrow. He began buying and selling non-FDA-approved medication to make a quick buck. I questioned why she was spilling all this to me. If he's hell-bent on landing himself in jail, who am I to intervene? But she insisted that she'd tried to persuade him to cease, but instead, he stopped coming home. He's constantly at the clinic with his sketchy clients, leaving her to care for their child alone. So she felt compelled to ask if perhaps I could convince him to stop. I mean, I have no sway over him. Of course, I can't make him stop. But she suggested that, given my position as a legal associate, I might be able to predict the consequences if she reported him. I'm not really supposed to be divulging all this, but I made it clear to her that I couldn't assist her. She was complicit in his scheme to throw me under the bus so they could live their dream life. So, there's no way I'm stepping in to help her now. She pleaded with me to rethink, arguing that if he ended up in jail and lost everything, there would be no one to provide for her and her son. I retorted, "What do you mean? We have a large family with enough resources to support you." She countered that they could potentially lose everything if the authorities discovered my brother's illicit drug trade. It's been a few days since our conversation, and I'm wrestling with whether it's worth saving them after all they've put me through, or if I should just let them face the consequences of their actions. Update. 2 months later, I was on the verge of sending an anonymous tip to the police with all the information she'd given me. Well, I still plan to, but it won't be anonymous. He needs to admit to the family that he set me up. I thought my ordeal was over, that I was doomed to live in perpetual exile, but it seems my fate hasn't been sealed just yet. My family has been pleading with me to return because everything is spiraling out of control. Why would they seek assistance from someone they deemed as lowly as me? Well, it's because I've managed to turn my life around in the 2 years since my last post. Plus, I'm the only one who, given what I know, wouldn't send him to jail. I guess the fact that I'm even writing this gives away the ending. Yes, I did send him to jail. But let me fill you in on all the juicy details of how I exacted my revenge and left them with nothing. Shortly after my sister-in-law's visit, I sought advice from my boss about the hypothetical situation and decided that I couldn't stay silent any longer. My brother is a deceitful, unfaithful, greedy individual who puts people at risk. Moreover, he's deeply entangled with some shady characters. I couldn't let this continue. Just as I was about to head home and report him to the police, I received a message from my mother urgently requesting me to come home. It was a matter of great importance. I was curious to hear what she had to say after discarding me like an unwanted pet. So, a few days later, I found myself at their doorstep. Both my parents looked like they'd aged a decade. When I inquired about the situation, they brushed it off, saying I must be tired from the long journey. They then ushered me into a room to rest. Being back in their house stirred up a whirlwind of emotions, and I should have declined their offer. But I was already on the brink of spilling the beans to the police. I was fearful of my brother and his dubious associates. I thought it would be better if he confessed, as it might lead to a lighter sentence. So, after freshening up, I summoned my parents to the living room and insisted they spill the beans immediately. They confessed that they were aware of Christie's visit and needed my assistance. I retorted that they must be aware of Danny's illicit activities by now. They admitted they were. He had come clean about everything, and by everything I mean the whole shebang, how he swindled their money years ago, framed me, and established his own clinic. He had lived a guilt-free life for years, reaping the benefits of his betrayal. Now, with danger looming, he suddenly felt remorse. My mom's eyes welled up with sorrow as she pleaded with me to consider forgiving him for his actions. She claimed the entire family felt awful about how I was treated and wanted to make amends. I pointed out the glaring inconsistency. When I was banished, the whole family was present. But now, when they were seeking forgiveness, it was just them. I yearned to gaze into the eyes of each family member and declare, "I told you so." The thrill of vindication was intoxicating. I could almost taste the sweet flavor of justice, but it all hinged on their next move. They agreed to my demand and convened a family gathering the following day. I peered into the eyes of every relative who had once expressed their disappointment in me. I challenged them, "Where were you when I pleaded for your trust? You've always branded me the outcast and never offered your support. All these years, not a single one of you checked in to see if I was doing all right, if I was even alive or had enough to eat. I admit I've made numerous mistakes in my life, but I've never resorted to theft, not from you or anyone else. Yet you chose to believe Danny." They had trusted Danny, who was now huddled in a corner, head bowed, unable to meet my gaze. In a soft voice, he admitted that the blame was his alone, not theirs. But they were on the brink of facing the consequences of his actions. I asked him how, and he explained that his startup capital was the stolen money. Moreover, he still had connections to the family business. Everyone was about to be scrutinized, and their assets were likely to be frozen for investigation. The police were closing in on him, and they had secured a search warrant for his clinic. Every piece of tech he owned, computers, phones, you name it, was about to be under the microscope. It was a wonder he was even sitting here right now. I was curious about how this all tied back to me. So he dropped to his knees and pleaded with me to vouch for him in court and consider temporarily taking over his portion of the business until the investigation blew over. I just stared at him, baffled, as he played his trump card, claiming he had always been envious of me. We both knew that was a far cry from the truth, and that he was just trying to ensure his wife and child weren't left high and dry. He admitted that he knew his wife had spilled the beans to me, and that this information could be used as evidence, but he wanted me to fib in court to reduce the likelihood of him facing the maximum penalty. He made a heartfelt plea, stating that his medical license was the only thing he had left, and losing it would leave him devoid of any purpose in life. His wife, who had brought their child along, was now in tears, begging for my forgiveness. My uncle, a priest, chimed in about the significance of forgiveness and its path to eternal life. Oh, so now we're discussing forgiveness when they're on the brink of losing everything. But where was this sentiment all those years ago? They didn't give me a chance to defend myself and prove my innocence before they cast me aside and erased me from their memories. And I'm certain they erased me from their memory because everything that once belonged to me in my parents' house has vanished. As my uncle continued his sermon, other family members started to chime in, pointing fingers and blaming each other for the mess they found themselves in. I'd had my fill of their half-hearted apologies and theatrical performance. I stood up and declared that they could carry on with their soap opera, but I was checking out. My father had the audacity to raise his voice, claiming that I owed them this. It was laughable hearing this from him, the same man who had belittled me for years. He had crushed every dream I'd ever had, ensuring I could never achieve them. I once dreamt of working with cars, but he made sure every mechanic I approached for an apprenticeship turned me away. But I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. I was no longer the weak boy they discarded. I matched his volume and told him to back off. I let them know that all they had ever done was put on a show of being superior and virtuous. People respected them, oblivious to the fact that they were hypocrites. They looked down on the less fortunate, went to great lengths to evade taxes, and never missed an opportunity to badmouth each other. I didn't feel a shred of guilt about bringing them down. I rose from my seat, didn't utter another syllable, and left them to their squabbling. Once I reached my motel, I had to power off my phone because they wouldn't stop bombarding me with messages. They were starting to look desperate, knowing that I held the power to dismantle everything they'd built. They'd always managed to avoid scrutiny, getting away with so much. But now, they were about to be under the microscope. I turned off my phone and checked out of the motel. I headed to an old friend's place and crashed there for the night. I wouldn't put it past them to try to silence me. I know it might sound like I'm painting my family as potential criminals, but trust me, they're just plain nuts. Well, I need to get some sleep now. But there's a lot more I need to share with you guys. Update. It turns out my decision to stay at my friend's place was a wise one. The next morning, I discovered that my motel room had been broken into. My laptop, which I'd left behind, was destroyed, and my clothes were in shambles. Rookies trying to silence me before I could talk to the cops. But the joke's on them. I'd already contacted the police right after my sister-in-law came begging me to persuade him to quit his shady dealings. I had plenty of time to weigh my options and reflect on what I overheard in the store years ago. His power was expanding each year, all thanks to the crime he pinned on me, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. So even before my folks called me back home, I'd given my statement and all the evidence, including my bank statement from years ago when my family chose not to believe me. The police then equipped me with a wire to record his confession when I met my parents. My buddy, whose place I crashed at, was a detective who was just missing the final piece of the puzzle, and with that, he could finally arrest my brother. The whole operation was executed so smoothly. I'd been waiting for months for a chance to see him pay for his actions. My sister-in-law inadvertently handed me the perfect opportunity, and I seized it. This morning, Danny, along with my parents, were arrested in connection with selling illegal drugs and smuggling. I anticipate the facade will start to crumble in the next few days, and some of them will turn on him to save their own hides. Fast forward 6 months. It's been half a year since my brother was put behind bars. My family pleaded and threatened me to retract my statement, which was the most incriminating one. But even if I had, the evidence against him was too compelling. My sister-in-law felt stabbed in the back when she discovered I'd become a state witness and had the audacity to confront me at my workplace, where I promptly had her escorted out. Following that, I secured a restraining order against the entire clan of lunatics. As I foresaw, most family members turned on him in court. They recounted how he initially swindled the money, set me up, and established his own clinic. They even got employees who had witnessed his wrongdoings to testify. The case was clear-cut, and the evidence against him was too substantial, particularly since he refused to disclose his clients' identities. Given his reluctance to rat them out, they must be some seriously dangerous folks. His medical license was also under scrutiny due to these allegations, and, as expected, he lost it all. He was sentenced to a decade in prison, the maximum penalty for his crime, and the part that hit him hardest was the suspension of his medical license. All the assets he'd accumulated while running his illicit business were seized and became state property. The only unfortunate part was that my parents' clinic managed to escape unscathed. It's just a rumor, but I heard they tossed my brother under the bus to save their own skins. Now he knows what it's like when everyone turns their back on you, refusing to believe your side of the story. After all was said and done, it was only a matter of time before the family structure crumbled. Their reputation was shredded, and they started losing clients at an alarming rate. Who would want to visit their clinic now? On top of that, health inspectors began making regular visits to ensure everything was up to par. You can imagine how well that sat with the patients and staff. Their cherished empires started to crumble, brick by brick, day by day, and I reveled in it. I was chuckling all the way to the bank with the compensation I received for the emotional distress they caused me when they accused me of theft all those years ago. I only had a small chunk of my student debt left, and the rest was all mine. I paid it off and invested the remainder. I feel like my time for further education has passed. I mean, I'm not getting any younger, but if I come across a business opportunity that piques my interest, I might just dive in. For now, I'm content with my job as a paralegal. I really like the work I do here, even though it can be quite demanding at times. But the best part is, I'm doing it for myself, not for my so-called family. Update. Here's the final piece. Hey folks, just wanted to add this little tidbit here. I recently got news from my mom, who hasn't stopped trying to reach me since I permanently left town. I've had to privatize my social media accounts and change my phone number multiple times. She informed me that my father passed away a couple of weeks ago and has already been laid to rest. I've been ignoring her calls. She also mentioned that he left me in charge of the clinic. It must be some sort of cruel joke. Why on earth would I want to be involved with that clinic again? They only want me around now because my brother's in jail and of no use to them. He was their golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. Look where he ended up. I've grown tired of her constant pestering, so I've decided to file a harassment complaint against her. For years, they made me feel worthless, and I bought into it, never feeling motivated to achieve anything. Now, I'm considering opening my own restaurant. I'm determined to make it a hit, and folks will recognize my name, the name that I've personally selected. Just a few days back, I decided to change my last name. I want absolutely no association with them. She and the rest of those scavengers could lose it all and wind up homeless for all I care.